When I was in grade school, I was terrified by two particular things. By the time I was 40, they had both happened to me. I don't mean to imply that I wasn't afraid of anything else. All of us in those years were scared of the threat of nuclear war, which, as we now know, was even closer than we then thought. Lots of other little things I didn't like, needles, whatever. But the two particular things really, really scared me. The first was cancer, and the second was insanity. What they really had in common, which I only realized later in thinking about it, is a loss of control, and in another way, a betrayal, in the case of cancer, by my own body, of myself, and in the case of insanity, of my own mind. And to my current way of thinking, they both reflected a discomfort, a feeling of potential threat of me by my own body, by my own mind. Now, you might ask, what am I other than my own body and my own mind? But I think the answer to that is that the me, the ego, if you want to be Freudian, is really just a part of the whole enterprise. And particularly in a young person, that part feels somewhat beleaguered by the disobedience, shall we say, or the potential for disobedience of the rest of the great beast that hosts our egos. But in any event, it was a very significant fear. There wasn't much I could do about either of these dangers, but this idea of these little cells proliferating in my body out of control, and related, the idea of my mind itself betraying me and causing me to behave out of control and perceive things out of control. Very, very scary. When I was 35, I went on a hiking trip in the White Mountains. It was along the Crawford Path up to Lakes of the Clouds and then down. Very nice trip. When I finished that hike, I noticed a pain in one of my testicles, and I figured I just bruised it or something. It was quite a sharp pain, but I didn't pay too much attention to it. And then about, I don't know, a week, 10 days later, the pain suddenly went away. That seemed a little bit odd. So I actually, felt the testicle, see if I could detect anything, and there was sort of a lump at one end. I mean, a bump there, and I knew that didn't feel like it had been there before. So I went into my family doctor, and he said, yeah, he could feel it, and he recommended that I go into a urologist at Mass General. So I was anxious by this point, but again, there's no point getting too fussed about it. The main thing is just to do whatever it's possible to do. So I scrambled around. I got an appointment with the head of urology at Mass General. Went into that appointment. He examined the testicle and said, yes, indeed, there is a lump there. Took me right down to ultrasound, took a look at it, and went, you have an embryonal carcinoma there. We're going to have to take that out. Admitted me to the hospital and operated the following morning. It's an unusual sequence of events, but he was quite a decisive fellow. That operation was really quite a piece of cake. For one thing, I didn't have any time to agonize about it. It all happened so quickly. And for another thing, it's really very simple. The testicle's not very well attached, and all they had to do was just go in with an incision, the same way you would with a hernia operation, and then you just remove the testicle. That way, they don't cut the scrotal sac at all. And in fact, after the operation, I was, in the hospital bed, and one of the nurses came by and said, you really should get up and walk around. And I said, oh, sure, happy to do that. It's a little bit painful, but nothing significant. And then he said, 23 times around this whole floor is a mile. And I said, well, I take that to be a little challenge. And so I got up with my the pole with my various drips on it, and I did 23 slow laps of that hall. So I walked a mile the afternoon of the surgery. So I was pretty well, I didn't feel that's much knocked down by it. And I did lost some time from work for it, but not a terrible amount. And I really snapped back to full functioning very quickly. Now, there's still a question, of course, whether the cancer had spread beyond the testicle. And when they looked at the actual tumor, there was good news and bad news. The bad news is that it had sort of sprinkled in amongst the embryonal cancer, which is a relatively less worrisome variety. Still potentially deadly, mind you, but not terribly aggressive. There were these little things I imagine them being somewhat similar to like sprinkles on an ice cream cone called syncytial trophoblasts, and these were not good things to have. They were if cancer is composed of those, they're very, very aggressive, and one of the deadlier forms of testicular cancer. It wasn't primarily composed of those. They just were kind of sprinkles, but there were enough of them there to be a bit of a worry. And the urologist recommended a second operation called a transabdominal lymph node dissection, which is a removal of a bunch of lymph nodes that are connected to the testicle in order to see whether the cancer spread. That's the way it spreads. It doesn't spread through the blood system. It spreads through the lymph system initially. And so that was scheduled, and that took a couple months to be scheduled. That was a pretty big deal. What they're removing is teensy, but it's basically spread all up and down, your abdomen. So the incision was insane. It was probably, at least a foot long, basically right between my breastbone to basically as far as you can go into the pubic hair. A little detour around the belly button. So they went in and did this, and they basically didn't find anything, and there was no indication of spread. There actually was a little bit of ambiguity initially, but they concluded that it was had not spread. That wasn't a complete guarantee, but it was pretty solid. And they continued to do X-rays. Actually, what they do is chest X-rays, because where it eventually settles is in the lungs. Continued to do X-rays for a couple of years, and then they just said, just forget this. There's just no more risk. And now it's more than 20 years ago. It's something else will kill me, but not the cancer from that original testicular cancer. But while it didn't. And I should add that operation with the very big incision was actually quite a huge impact, and I was knocked down, and really took several months to get back to 100% after that. it just was a big surgery, and even though I was walking around and this and that, it had taken the stuffing out of me, you might say. But physically speaking, after 6 months, it was all just pretty much ancient history. Some impact in terms of cutting nerves here and there, and it wasn't certainly wasn't a positive impact, but nothing devastating. But psychologically speaking, it was really quite huge, because at 35, I had been still pretty much contemplating. I knew I wasn't immortal, but I certainly wasn't thinking about dying anytime soon, and I wasn't organizing my life around that by any means. When this happened, even though I got into the clear pretty quickly, within 6 months, I was, very confident of being free of it, and within a couple of years, completely. And I should add, even at the very beginning, he was saying that even if it spread, that chemotherapy was 90% effective. That's to say, 10% chance of dying. That was a little bit unclear how that fit in with these sprinkles, but basically there were a lot of sort of safety nets in this whole situation, and it wasn't as if I was faced death imminently and with any high probability. But it was not a happy moment, and the psychological effect psychological effect of this on me was tremendous, and really still significant. Basically, my time horizon went from indefinite to almost nothing. I couldn't bring myself to buy 2 or 3 years worth of a magazine subscription, for example, for more than a decade after this. I just figured, well, who knows if I'll be around to enjoy that second year. We'll just buy 1 year. And for everything else, I really, I felt as if it was kind of overtime or extra time, and that in a way, something died when that cancer happened, and everything else was like an extra treat. And that's great. That's cool to live that way. But it also meant that I really didn't plan. I couldn't really think ahead. I couldn't think, where will I be in 5 years or 10 years? Where do I want to be? What are my objectives? Or what are my projects or plans? I couldn't think that far. And I really just sort of followed my nose and went step by step. I did enjoy myself, and after I got well enough, I took a trip to New Zealand. That's another story. But that trip was a treat for having survived, and that had very nice consequences. But the negative aspect of not sort of owning your future, it definitely had some negative effects as well as good effects.